I'd be pretty surprised if she voted to acquit.
Right.
I think so far the Democrats have been party line on everything, so you haven't seen any cracks in their facade. I think you could see Kristen Sinema, the new senator from Arizona. I could see a universe where she votes to acquit. It's not impossible that Doug Jones votes to acquit, the Democrat from Alabama, although I don't think he will, but it's not impossible.
Why don't you think he will? Because he's a Democrat in a very red state.
I think he realizes he's going to lose in November, and so he's wanting to do what Heidi Heitkamp. Remember Heidi Heitkamp, who was a Democrat elected in North Dakota?
Yep.
So last cycle, she just voted liberal on everything and went down and lost badly.
Go down swinging.
And I think Jones has basically made that same call, that he's going to lose, and so he wants to go back and be lionized in liberal circles.
Speaking of efforts that seem futile but are probably worth a shot, you did not spend your whole day in the Capitol. You, I noticed, headed over to the White House, where a new plan for peace in the Middle East was being announced. Can you? I mean, obviously you can if physically, but is it appropriate now for you to tell a little bit about what happened?
Sure. And actually, as it so happens today, I went to the White House not once but twice. So I started the day with a meeting in the White House with Jared Kushner, who's been the president's point person on the Middle East peace process, and a number of other senators. And he was talking to us about the substance of their proposal and walking through it. And so it was essentially a pre-brief of here's what's going to be announced. And I got to say, the White House did a remarkable job of keeping the details quite quiet, which pretty much nothing in this town is quiet. So for them to do that was well done. And then I left and went to a couple of meetings, and then I came back at noon for the big announcement. And President Trump was there, but also Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was there. And they had a big announcement at the White House. And, you know, it was interesting. I think there were several points that were powerful. Number one was just the contrast. That President Trump is standing up and announcing major efforts trying to achieve peace in the Middle East. Now, that's hard. You want to talk about really, really hard? That's hard. But you actually have a president who's working and trying to advance American interests and trying to support our friend and ally Israel. And the contrast, the Democrats are just in this impeachment circle. And by the way, at the announcement today with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, you know how many Democrats were there at the announcement?
How many?
0.
Well, they were so busy having fun at the impeachment trial.
They're focused just on partisan politics. And listen, the deal, the terms of it are still not, I don't know all the details of the terms.
Is there any sense of what this deal includes?
So what Jared walked through, and some of what the President Netanyahu walked through also, is it is a deal that gives Israel a great deal. So it recognizes the legitimacy of settlements that Israel has had, settlements in what's called Judea and Samaria, which are beyond the lines, what are called the 1967 lines. And so that for Israel is a big deal. Okay. Israel was attacked, and in 1967 expanded the map of Israel in a defensive war where they were defending their borders. And this map recognizes Israel's sovereignty over land that they've been in for a long, long time.
Half a century.
But that's a major acknowledgement of Israel's rights of sovereignty. It also, with regard to Jerusalem, keeps the core city of Jerusalem undivided. That is a big deal.
So there's some proposals that would divide Jerusalem between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis.
Now, this proposal keeps a portion of East Jerusalem, but it's outside of what has technically been the city. So the Palestinians could call what they had Jerusalem, but it preserves what is actually Jerusalem to be an Israeli city.
Okay.
But it also ensures that Muslims have access to the mosque in Jerusalem and to the holy site. So but at the same time, it sets up conditions for creating a Palestinian state, a two-state solution.
Okay.
And it also promises $50 billion in investment capital from Arab countries primarily, but it's a lot of capital into the new Palestinian state.
Oh, well, that's a pretty nice carrot stick there to try to bring people to the table for peace.
And look, the devil is in the details. Palestinian Authority refused to show up. So you didn't have the leader of the Palestinians there.
But he was invited.
He wouldn't take the phone call.
So this deal, while it may be a step forward, probably is not going to go anywhere.
Well, maybe not. I'll say the Trump administration did a couple of things that are pretty impressive. Number one, they got the support not only of Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, but also Benny Gantz, who is his principal rival. And the two of them, they keep having election after election to determine who's going to be the next prime minister.
Right.
And they're from different parties. They're different, very different politically. And both Netanyahu and Gantz supported this proposal.
So the two big sides in Israel are behind this deal.
That's a big deal, that the Trump administration was able to unify the kind of range of Israeli politics. That was not easy. And secondly, we've seen some early signs of support from the Arab world for this proposal. There were three different Arab ambassadors, Muslim ambassadors, who were there at the announcement, which is a big deal as well. And part of the White House's strategy is to try to get broad support so that the Palestinians feel more pressure to come to the table. Now, the White House has been very open that the details are negotiable, but you got to sit down and start negotiating. And my view on a two-state solution, there are a lot of Republicans who insist there's got to be a two-state solution.
A two-state solution would be state of Israel and then a new state for Palestine.
Yeah, and that used to be kind of Republicans were adamant, Democrats were adamant about it, but a lot of Republicans were adamant about it. I have been pretty vocal in saying, who the hell are we to tell them how they should resolve their security issues? That's a decision. Israel's a sovereign nation.
Right.
They should decide. If Israel thinks a two-state solution is a good idea, that's fine by me, but we shouldn't force it down their throat. I was encouraged today because you had Netanyahu and Gantz supporting it. You had Israel pretty enthusiastic about it. If they make that determination, I think we should be supportive of that. And I will say, listen, I have long been pessimistic that Middle East peace is going to burst out anytime soon. I don't think the Palestinian Authority wants peace.
It would seem that way.
I think they still refuse to recognize even that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state.
Right.
And they continue to embrace terrorism. I mean, they are in a unity government with Hamas, a terrorist organization. But even though I'm pessimistic that because I don't think the Palestinians want peace, what I have urged the Trump administration for 3 years is, because they've been very focused on trying to produce Middle East peace, you're more likely to get it if you're unequivocal in saying we stand with Israel. We're not going to waffle. We're not going to blow in the wind. We're not going to be, I don't know.
Sides, right.
Because if that's the case, the Palestinians have demonstrated for decades, they'll play world opinion. They'll attack us in the New York Times and let the U.S. flap back and forth.
Right.
And I will say the president has agreed with what I've said. So, for example, the Trump administration moved our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Republican and Democratic presidents had promised to do that. Nobody did it. Trump did it. That was a big deal. President Trump recognized the Golan Heights in the north of Israel as part of Israel. I had urged the president to do that. The president did it. And the president pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal.
Right.
Big deal. The Defense Department and State Department both opposed that. I made the case vigorously to the president. He did it. And I do think the dynamic, we are now negotiating from a position of strength where the president can say, we stand with Israel, but we'll facilitate a discussion for peace. And you know what? Palestinian Authority didn't show up, but the Democrats didn't either.
Quite a comparison. And it would seem, obviously the White House has some credibility on this issue. So while we may not, unfortunately, resolve Middle East peace tonight, we can, in our last moment or two here, get to a couple questions in the mailbag.
Great.
From Jay. Who breaks the tie if the impeachment vote on witnesses comes in 50-50?
So that's a complicated question. It's not entirely clear from the rules.
So it's not, I would think there'd be a simple answer in the Constitution or something.
Well, so there's normally a simple answer. So for most Senate votes, the vice president breaks the tie. The problem is the vice president isn't presiding.
Right.
So you don't have, and by the way, you wouldn't want the vice president presiding in the impeachment of the president.
It's got quite an
interest. If he gets impeached, he literally gets the job of president. So that would be, the framers knew what they were doing when they didn't put the vice president in the chair.
Right.
That'd be an interesting discussion if the vice president cast the tie-breaking vote. Well, sorry, bud.
Sorry, pal, you're out.
My office is square. It's not nearly as interesting as yours. look, it is somewhat ambiguous. If you go back to the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, the Chief Justice who was presiding there tried to cast a couple of tie-breaking votes, then the Senate pressed back on him, and so it's unclear.
Wow.
It is possible the Chief Justice could try to cast a tie-breaking vote, but there is ambiguity and uncertainty. We also adopted a scheduling rule, the language of which I think permits both sides to argue they win in the case of a tie. If we get to a tie, it's bad news. The best thing to do is don't have any ties, win by 51 votes.
Right. As with so many aspects of this, though, it does seem we may be in uncharted territory. Question from Matt. Senator, where did you get your boots, and where can I get a pair?
So these are Lucchese boots. They're made in El Paso, Texas, and I'm a huge fan of Lucchese. I have a bunch of pairs of Lucchese.
And it's got the Senate
it has
emblem on it.
The Senate seal on the front, but then on the back, I don't know if the camera can get it or not, but there's what's called the Come and Take It flag, which in Texas, it was pivotal for Texas independence. When Texas was part of Mexico, part of the nation of Mexico, Santa Anna was the dictator in Mexico. And he issued an order to the town of Gonzales, a little town in South Texas. He said, hand over your guns and hand over the cannon that guards the city. And the Texians, that's what they called Texans back then, was Texians. The Texians in Gonzales, they made a flag and they hoisted it above the city. And it had a picture of the cannon, and underneath it the legend, come and take it. And that was the beginning of the Texas Revolution, where we fought a revolution, had the Alamo, but ultimately won at San Jacinto, and Texas became our own nation. For 9 years, we were the Republic of Texas, an independent nation, and then we joined the United States. So that's why I wear that flag.
I love Texans, and I love Texians too, but I love Texans. Last question is for me from
By
Steve.
the way, a quick aside, Heidi and I go to church at First Baptist Church in Houston. Yeah. Something our pastor said a few years ago. Do you know our church was founded by American missionaries abroad? Because it was founded when they were the Republic of Texas, and they were literally American missionaries who had gone to the foreign country of Texas as missionaries, and they started a church, the First Baptist Church of Houston. And so in our charter, it was American missionaries visiting us.
That and look, their activities clearly worked, and they're also part of the country. Last question before we go from Steve. For me, Michael, what's it like talking to the Zodiac Killer? It is great talking to the Zodiac Killer because true crime podcasts tend to do very well on the charts, and I think that may explain some of our success, remaining, even today, the number one podcast in the country.
Look, I will say, so I remember campaigning, and this one young guy held up a sign that said, "Are you the Zodiac Killer?" and I stopped and asked him, I said, "Son, if I was, would you really want to bring that sign here today?"
That I'm sufficiently terrified that I have to end the show. Make sure to get your mailbag questions in. The Senate will now be asking questions of the legal teams, and we want to pass your questions along. So tweet it at Ted Cruz, #verdict, and you can also email it in, mailbag@verdictpodcast.com. I'm Michael Knowles. This is Verdict with Ted Cruz.